All right, everyone, welcome back to the Be Healthy and Thrive podcast. My name is Brianna Wilkerson, and with me today I have Linda Clay, and she is here to kind of help us continue along this discussion and series around catalyzing your purpose, really discovering your passion and walking in it. And so thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Bree, for having me here. I'm so excited to be a part of your program.
Yes, me too. And so can you just start with introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and kind of what even started you on your own purpose and passion journey.
Sure. What I call myself an intuitive mentor and life and business strategist. And the reason I have kind of a long-winded title is because, excuse me, I have an intuitive ability to be able to read between the lines. So when I'm working with clients, I can hear beyond the words they're actually saying and be able to pull out of them things that maybe they haven't really thought of or really had buried, they hadn't rediscovered. And then I say life and business strategist because I can help people sort through their life. I can help them start a business, create a business, and get them on the path to where they want to go. And my journey has been rather long, so I'll try to do it in a short time frame. It started actually when I was a teenager, and I was a child of an alcoholic, which does affect a person's, growing up. I ended up being an unwed mother in the 60s, which really was something that you weren't supposed to do. Good girls did not get pregnant. You definitely didn't usually keep your child. You were actually sent away to either a relative or an unwed mother's home. And I actually ended up in an unwed mother's home for about 6 months. And my parents, being of the Depression era, had a very, just had kind of a point blank attitude. Okay, this happened, we're going to move on. And that was it. There was no support, there was no coddling at all. And so after I had the baby and I gave her up for adoption, I remember being picked up by my mom and her just saying, okay, it's over with. It's now time to move forward. And it's like, I'm 18 years old. I have absolutely no idea what to do with all these feelings and thoughts that I had. And I learned then that I had to do it myself, that I had to work through life's challenges on my own. Eventually, or a while later, I got engaged to the baby's father. And, life was all of a sudden rosy, as you are when you're like 18, 19, and, you've got this love of your life and everything, except for one thing. The Vietnam War was going on. He was deployed to go to Vietnam. And the next thing I know, I get a Dear Jane letter. And I was crushed. It was like, here's one thing. All of a sudden, what I thought my life was going to be wasn't. So again, I had to move on. And I ended up going back home I was living in Seattle, and I ended up going back home to my parents to help them out. And I met my future husband. And we actually met and were married within 4 months. And our marriage lasted 28 years. And through that path, you have this feeling of joy. You have this like the world is our oyster kind of thing. I mean, this was in the late or early 70s, and we were like too young, and everything. We just knew we could conquer the world. And sure enough, we made some decisions. We moved to California. He went to work on the railroad. We had all this life going for us, and it seemed like things were going well. And then one day I was working, and one day I decided that we decided we wanted to move back to Washington State. So I started a career in a retail organization, and we moved back to Washington. The kids got older. And then one day we woke up and found that our oldest daughter was addicted to drugs and alcohol. And that created another crisis in our life it's like a death in the family, because drugs and alcohol become their life. The family is no longer important. And I had to go through all kinds of self-work, trying to figure out, one, I wasn't to blame because I felt guilty. And all the healing that goes with it. It was like a grieving process. So you're going through stages of anger and denial and guilt and all those stages that you do with grief, until I finally came to the realization that I couldn't help her. I couldn't save her, which is what a mother's natural instinct is to save their children, protect them. That I had to let her go her own way and fall when she finally fell. And so meanwhile, I was working in that retail company and was given an opportunity to become a store manager. But unfortunately, it was in a town that I didn't want to move to, nor did my family. And I was basically told that if I don't take that promotion, I would never be promoted. And that's kind of the gist with corporate life. They just basically control how you want to live. So I took the promotion and entered into a 2-year time frame of being put in a situation, which I wasn't aware until later, as an example to the other store managers in the district. So my expectations were put on me were very high. I couldn't meet them. And it was like one of the most stressful periods of my life. So I have a daughter who's struggling with drugs and alcohol and getting counseling and getting all the support she needs there, we think. And I've got this career that's like, just I was working 80 hours a week, taking work home, doing all that kind of stuff. And so finally I was put in a position of, I have to make a choice because I knew they were going to fire me. The signs were there. So I quit. And, corporations will do that. They push you, they push you out the door. They, demand so much that all of a sudden you're in this position of, what do I do? So, but the best thing about the whole thing, and again, things become gifts later on in life. I got on at Barnes & Noble as a manager trainee, was given the biggest store west of the Mississippi. So for 5 years, I was like in my element. This was like the best thing in the whole world. It was like phenomenal. It was like Christmas every single day. And we opened that store the first year at 10 million. And when I left, we were at 15 million. So we added $1 million every year in volume. And life was like good. And I'm sure the reader or the listeners all know this. You have these periods in life and it's like, oh, the world is your oyster. Everything is just falling into place. And then one day my husband got sick. And he had diabetes and they kept telling us it was diabetes, but he kept having this pain in his back and we couldn't figure out what it wouldn't go away. And that was the year I call my WTF year, because from that point on, I had 5 to 6 major life crises happen one after the other. And so we kept taking him to the doctor. We couldn't get a solution. We ended up buying a house. It was our dream house. Bruce and I had sat down. We had this 5-year plan. We knew exactly what we were going to do. My granddaughter, my oldest daughter, was still struggling with drugs and alcohol. We ended up being the caregivers for her daughter, who was 2 years old at the time. And I went on a business trip to New York. I came back and my youngest daughter goes, Mom, there's something wrong with Dad. I had to take him to the urgent care for pain. It was so bad. So, I get home, I talk to my husband. He says, no, I'm fine. I'm better. But within a week or so, I'm taking him back to the urgent care, who then referred us to the emergency room because they couldn't get that pain under control. So we ended up being referred to a doctor, and the next 3.5, drink of water, 3.5 weeks were tests after test after test. Nothing was showing up. There was, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And then finally, the doctor said, we have one more test we're going to do, but it's going to take a couple weeks to get the results back. Okay. You're just like in limbo until you find out what's going on. Well, we got the test back. The doctor calls us. We go in and the doctor looks at me and he says, I need to refer you to an oncologist. And I just could feel the life just drain out of me. But I kept telling myself, okay, well, cancer's not the end of the world. They have all these things now. They can take care of it. And what he was diagnosed with is what they call multimyelinoma, which is a blood cancer. It's inside the bone, though. So by the time they did the MRI, the cancer had spread halfway up his spine. It's also one of the most painful ones that there are because you basically can become crippled with it. And but he wasn't getting better. They did the radiation, they did the chemo, they did all this stuff, and he wasn't getting better. And we couldn't figure out what was wrong. The doctor couldn't figure out what was wrong. And so I remember getting a call from my daughter, and she goes, "Mom, you've got to come home from work," because I was trying to juggle my job and take care of a family and take care of my husband. And I come home and his feet are swollen, and we get a friend, we pile him in the car, we take him to the doctor, and the doctor looks at him and says, "You're going to have to go back to the hospital." He had been in the hospital a couple of times before. So we take him to the hospital, and he just keeps talking about this pain in his stomach area and all this. And so finally they do a CAT scan, and he had a different kind of cancer. So he had two kinds of cancer. And that, I think that day when the doctor said, "There's nothing more we can do because you can't do chemo on one kind of cancer, it won't help the other one," vice versa. And I just said, "I'm taking him home." So I took him home. I ended up nursing him because hospice has to have a terminal diagnosis. They didn't have that yet. His original cancer, he was supposed to live 2.5 to 5 years. So your mindset is, I've got 2.5 to 5 years to, really appreciate and live our life together. And all of a sudden, I didn't. And so I nursed him. I did the IVs. I did all that kind of stuff. And he was gone within 10 days. And my whole entire world was wiped out again. And 2 weeks later, my oldest daughter tried to commit suicide, and I found her. And so that was like this year of crises after crises after crises, having to do with my career, became a single parent to 2 adult daughters, found my one daughter, and then ended up at the end of the year becoming a single parent to my granddaughter. And I went into I crashed and burned. I went into severe depression. I suffered from PTSD. And to be honest, Bree, I sat there for 2 years. I didn't want to get better. I didn't want to be hurt anymore. The pain was so great that I didn't want to move. I took care of my daughter. It was like on autopilot, and I learned how to get through each day. That led me to a wake-up call by the universe, and the universe loves to come down and say, "Hey, enough is enough." And sure enough, I woke up one day and I went, "I don't have any income coming in. I have a house payment. I can't make it. I can't get Social Security disability. My disability's run out. Oh my God." And I have Kelsey was probably 4.5, 5 years old at the time. I'm raising this daughter. So I cried and, really cried and went, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And so I called my family. I moved in with my brother, and I started taking an active approach to changing my life. And I sent out resumes, got a job. I moved her and I to Idaho. Was not the best fit for us. So I applied at Barnes & Noble again and got a job in New Hampshire. So I packed everything and moved us clear across country. Had no idea, had never been there, didn't know anybody, but I did it anyway. And it was one of the best moves I ever made in my life. While I was still healing from my husband and from everything else, it taught me that depression gives you this false read of who you are and takes away your confidence level. It takes away your belief in yourself. And those little naggy voices really will turn up, and they will constantly say, "See, told you so, kind of thing." I lived there for a year. I turned a store around, and I realized that I was a great store manager. I had great talent to take care of things. I didn't give up my job in Seattle because I was a bad store manager. There were extenuating circumstances. And so it was a fantastic move that way. And then one of my favorite stories about this whole thing, and it goes into the whole thing about being a catalyst, is I realized that being a store manager at Barnes & Noble was not the best job for me with a 5.5-year-old because I couldn't get decent childcare. She ended up coming to the store with me. Why? She loved it because she loves books. It wasn't a healthy environment for her. So I decided that I wanted to become a Waldorf school administrator. And she had been in a preschool that was Waldorf based, and I loved it. So I figured, okay, that would be perfect. I could work the same hours that she goes to school. I can raise her. It'll be totally different. So I do a treasure map, and I put the Seattle Space Needle on there. I put ferry boats, and I put evergreen trees because I wanted it to be back where my family was. And I put school administrator. I put a place for Kelsey in the school. Everything I could think of that had to do with becoming a school administrator. And I had it on my kitchen counter, and I would see it in the morning when I had my coffee, see it when I got home from work, see it before I went to bed. I made sure I saw it several times a day. Within 3 months, I had saved enough money to move. I had found a moving company that was having a special deal that would pack me up and move me back, all my stuff back there. I found a Waldorf school that took Kelsey out on a scholarship. And so I said, okay, I'm going. I had no job, some savings, and off we go again across country back to Seattle. And so she starts school. I drive there every day, and I go, gosh, this is I don't want to drive back and forth all the time. I'll volunteer. So I volunteered at the school, and within several weeks, they asked if I wanted a part-time job. I went, heck yeah, I'm here anyway. Why not? And then they asked me several weeks later, maybe a couple months or whatever, do I want a full-time job? Why not? And then it ended up within a year or so, I was the school administrator. And so it all started when I put it down on paper exactly how I wanted it to become. And I was there for 5 years. It was an awesome experience. From there, I built a business, a notary signing business. And that kind of went belly up during the whole crisis, after the crises and all that, when things got tight. So I decided I need to get it a job. So I applied for a job in California, and I got it. And it was one of the worst jobs I've ever had. So I said, okay, what am I going to do? And I said, well, I'll apply for an escrow assistant job at a company. And I did, and I got that. Never done escrow ever. And I was 61. And so I walked into it, learned the business, did exceptionally well. But then at 63, I got laid off. And it's like, okay, now what do I do? And part of that process was nobody wanted to hire baby boomers. It was in a really tight year in the economy. The unemployment had gone from a year to 6 months. So I knew I had to do something. So I started a virtual assistant business consultancy and did okay in that and was doing okay in that. And then all of a sudden, one day I woke up and I go, wow, I don't know who I am. I mean, I was, again, crying because we tend to do that when we're all like emotional. And my granddaughter now was like 18, 19. She was ready to do her own thing. And it's like, I didn't know who I was. I'd raised 2 families. I didn't know if I liked vanilla or chocolate ice cream. And it was like, what am I going to do? So what did I do? I decided I have to do something crazy. I applied for a visa for Portugal. I got it. I sold every single thing that I owned, but what would fit in 2 suitcases, and then stored a few things with my daughter. And I went to Portugal for 5.5 months. Best catalyst ever, because it brought me to the point of recognizing that my gift and talent lies with helping other people. I kept having people ask me for advice. And it was like, oh, that's what I've done my entire life, is help people sort through things. And so I started rolling from the VA business consultancy to a mentoring business so that I can help people put their little pieces of the puzzle back together. So that's what brought me up to today.
Wow. That, I think it just shows you, I think you're a living example of, life happens to us. Life
Mm-hmm.
does happen, hard things, really almost life crippling things, but it's making the decision, like you chose differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it may have taken you a while to get there, but you realize that, hey, I've had all these experiences and they make me who I am. And it's something I have to offer. you know? And I don't know if you've heard of Lisa Nichols, but I
Mm-hmm.
recently discovered her. I don't know it's just, I wish I had discovered so many people earlier than what I did. And so I've been listening to her book, No Matter What. And
Uh-huh.
she just talks about like bounce back muscles and understanding muscle. I'm on the first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And it just reminds me of you just understand, like you understand, you're able to better understand other people as you start to understand situations,
Right.
understand what's happening and look beyond the emotions you may be feeling and saying, what's actually happening right
Mm-hmm.
now? And how can I give compassion to myself? How can I give compassion to others? And it's just so amazing that this whole journey has led you to here and that you're just able to help others in really significant ways. You know, you've gone through a lot of different life and business experiences. You're like a gem.
Yeah.
And so what would you say what is the kind of work that you do with your clients? Like, what are some of the common themes that you think that you see comes up around their own life, their own business, their own purpose?
Well, I think the common themes are a lack of self-belief or self-worth. They talk a lot about, having, change your money mindset. It really doesn't have to do with money as much as it has to do with mindset in general. That when you really look at that, it has to do with, am I worthy to have this abundance in my life? What do you define abundance? Abundance is everything. It's a flower. It's picking up a book and reading it. It's having a loving family. It's not just necessarily money, but it does boil down to believing in yourself that you are worthy of everything that's out there. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I run across is people not giving themselves permission to feel good about themselves. Because I think, unfortunately, our culture doesn't give you that. If you look at um, television advertising, which, I have to apologize to my dad because he was in advertising. But if you look at way television advertising is right now, they portray people as being these very thin, very beautiful, very motivated people. It doesn't show the side of us that is there, which is the dark side. We all have a dark side. We can never be a positive person 100% of the time. You're not going to be positive every minute of the day. Something's going to happen and you're going to go, oh crap, why did that have to happen? You're going to have that negative emotion, and that's okay. You need to have it because it helps you solve the problem or whatever it is that's in front of you. So self-worth, self-confidence, not being able to sort through everything in their head. So I call them chitty chatty voices. We have all those constant voices that you have to reframe, or they have too many thoughts and they don't know how to separate them out. What is a positive thought? What is a negative thought? What is a positive word versus a negative word? And so I help people do that.
It's so important. I love what you said too around money and mindset and stuff, that it actually, when you peel down the onion layers, it has nothing to do with, it does have something to do with money, but not really. It comes
Right.
back to something deeper. And that's, I went on that journey this past year when I was in entrepreneurship. I was forced to kind of look at my finances a little bit more and just saying,
Mm-hmm.
this actually has nothing to do with money. It's the idea of, me feeling like security and, wanting to
Right.
control and feeling like if I don't do everything like this won't be here. And so I think I love what you're saying is just getting to the root of
Mm-hmm.
things, which is the deeper, harder, tougher work, but it's the best when you can get there and realize, okay, it's actually this. So anytime this happens,
Right.
I need to switch my response, I
Right.
guess, to that.
And one of the things that happens is that people don't quite understand is so much of what we face comes from an earlier part in our life. So we carry things with us. It's like if you think of your mind as a miniature computer, every single thing you've heard, seen, your entire life is up there. And so things can trigger off a memory, but you're not even connecting what that memory is. It's really more of a feeling versus oh yeah, I remember when I was 5 and this happened. My mom told me money didn't grow on trees, which she used to tell me that. Um, but you don't necessarily connect with that. You just know that, oh wait, there's something wrong here because, you know, I'm not working hard enough or I'm not doing something, but you don't quite remember what happened and where you picked that up. But it normally is, like I said, my mom would tell us money does not grow on trees. Where did that come from? That came from her childhood because they were in the Depression and they were dirt poor. And so she brought that essence of poverty, scarcity into our house. Even though my dad and mom were middle class, it still carried over. And so it's through deep inner work that the stuff starts coming up and you go, oh, light bulb moment, that's where that comes from. And a prime example of that is I've always had people say, wow, you're so self-assured. And I'd look at them like, are you talking about me? In my head, I'm saying that. Well, I found out later that if you're a child of an alcoholic, you do tend to have an very definite outside portrayal to people, but inside you're totally different. And that's part of that, what happens when you're a child of an alcoholic. And once I heard that, I went, oh, well, that makes sense. I'm not really crazy. It's because, but I was like in my 50s when I heard that. So there's all these things that make us up.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot. But just, even the idea around, okay, you have your Facebook group, Capture Your Passion. And I love the group. And I just think, can you just share a little bit around kind of what you do there and your heart behind that and the way you lead the women through that, and even your clients? Like, what are some of the main things that you kind of challenge people to think and get to the root of?
Well, the Facebook group I started because I wanted a place for women to be able to go and learn about themselves, learn business tools, if they want to build a business or if they want to build a better career or if they want to change their lifestyle, but a place where they can go and they feel safe and they can learn from each other. It's been a long process, but I am a great believer in positivity. And so I believe that my emphasis in that group, or what I give people, is to be positive. Like, it's to say, yeah, it happens, but what can you do about it? And constantly asking that question. I want people to think. I think too many times people take in what they hear, but they don't think about it. They don't, how does that affect me? They don't ask themselves that. And so they just automatically assume, and I'll give you a prime example. They'll automatically assume that I heard so-and-so say that you can build a business in 6 weeks and you can be at 5 figures by the end of 6 weeks. That's not true. There might be exceptions to that, but the real world is that it takes time to build a business. It takes time to get your name out there. It takes time for you to figure out what works for me personally, because something might work for you, Bree, fantastically, but it might not work for me because I'm not you. And so you have to bring yourself into that. And so I think as I watched the group grow and I watched the interchange between people, I'm seeing people more and more share their thoughts and share and jump in and maybe support another person. And that's the whole purpose of the group, is to create a community of people who support each other on this journey of life, because it's tough. It's not easy. And you're in there, so I know you've seen some of the comments, and I read them, and it's like, I read one the other day and I was in tears, because you don't always have the understanding or knowledge of how you affect people. And so it was like, wow, it's like validation for me to keep the group going, to keep building it. It's a fantastic place. And when I work individually with clients, I use the same approach. It's positive. It's like, okay, So maybe you didn't do your task list this week that we had talked about, because they get tasks that they need to do every week. But you had all these circumstances happen. So let's look at the circumstances. How can you work around it? And let's just move on. It's not like, well, you should have done it, because life happens. You've got to be able to take life and embrace it and realize that any challenge that comes up is actually a gift, because it's put in front of you for you to work through something so you can get to the other side. And so I approach my clients the same way. I want it to be a mutual team effort. So like I was talking to one this week, and she asked me a question. I said, I can't make that decision for you. I can tell you this is what I would recommend, and this is how I view it on both sides of the coin, so to speak. But the ultimate decision is your choice. We have just the word choice is such a powerful word, but it's all in how you decide or how you choose is how your path will go. And so I really work in mindset. I'm finding mindset is probably the biggest thing that people have to face and change.
I'm all about mindset. It doesn't matter what sort of thing it is. It actually all comes down, because at the end of the day, man, this is perfect. At the end of the day, we often know what we need to do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't, but often we know. But there's something that in our minds that tell us otherwise, and we just don't realize that we can override that safety protocol our brain may be saying, and choose differently.
Right.
Like we're not, to choose differently, it might mean you're an outcast. It might mean it's harder or whatever it is. But I think we all actually, that's what we want to know we have freedom of choice, but we actually do have freedom of choice, but we deprive ourselves of it.
Well, you have to look at the fact that you brought it up. You touched on something that's so important, is that people want to be liked and loved. I mean, that is a human need. The problem is not being able to understand that you're not going to be liked by everybody, and you don't need to be liked by everybody. You just need to be yourself. And so if your choices take you down a path that is not, in quotes, approved, just because somebody doesn't approve of what you're doing doesn't mean that they don't love you. They can still love you. It's their right to not approve of what you're doing, because they are individuals just as like you are individuals. You don't have to base your choices on what other people think. And I think our society tends to make you feel that way. So one of the things, I just redid my mission statement. I don't have it memorized, but one of the things is I want women to understand that they don't have to live a life that has been told to them, that has been decided for them. They can live a life that they want to live, however that looks. It's okay.
Yeah, I agree. This is like my thing. So what would you, as we, we'll talk about your freebie and your giveaway in a bit, but as we wrap up, what do you think, what's the one bit of encouragement? Say if someone's been listening and they're just like, I am like here, this is speaking to me, what would you say to them to really encourage them to kind of move from that place of just feeling stuck to kind of going forward?
I would say one of the first things to do is to reframe your mind, the thoughts in your mind. And so one of the activities that I have my clients do is, if they have that voice that says, okay, so I'll go back to when I heard a voice say, Linda, you can't be a coach. We'll use that as a perfect example, or a coach or mentor. And so I wrote that down. And then underneath it, I put 3 reasons why that was a lie. Well, I'd been coaching for up to over 20 years. I'm coaching right now, or whatever I put on the paper. So you take that negative thought that's saying, no, you can't, or you won't be successful, or you've got to be kidding. What will people think? And underneath that, you write down 3 positive statements that counteract that. And that helps to quiet those voices down. Because if we listen to those chitty-chatty voices, we will never move forward at all. And so you have to shut them down. The more you do it, the quieter they become. Do they ever go away? No, they never, ever go away. They will crop up. at the oddest times. And I just had a little chat with mine last week. You know, they come up, something happened, it triggered something. And so I'm going, okay, enough, I'm done. Let's move on. And I've learned to basically, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I've learned to basically just say, okay, thanks for sharing. I'm moving on. I don't need.
Yeah. Thanks for the warning sign, but I'm going this way.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Just recognizing that, maybe at one point that thought served you, it helped protect you in a certain situation or whatever, but it's like you could choose to no longer have that thought, no longer have that habit, so forth.
Right.
That's very powerful. I really challenge everyone listening to write down that one little chitty chatty negative thing and write down 3 reasons it's a lie.
Yep. It works. It totally works. EFT works. That's awesome. Tapping, meditation, getting outside, in other words, when you're sitting in a position and those voices will, if you're like, I think they come up a lot when you're bored or you're kind of like got too much going on in your head, they get louder. So do something different. Get up and go for a walk outside. Get away from the situation that is creating those voices. Do dishes. Hand washing dishes is one of my favorite ways of meditating. Because it's taking me away from the situation where I feel overwhelmed. And yes, I get overwhelmed just like everybody else. And it gives me a breathing space to kind of get back to my center and go, okay, no, I can do this, kind of thing. So just some little tips. Yeah.
Well, speaking of meditation, can you tell us a little bit about your freebie? I wrote it down here. One sec. Your inner wisdom breakthrough.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So I developed this meditation. It's very short, but it's probably about 6-7 minutes, but it's really to help women tap into themselves. And what I have found in working with so many different people is that they think they know what they want. So you've got the surface want. It's what's on the very top. But underneath, as there's many layers. And so this meditation is to help you kind of get down through the layers to really figure out what it is you want out of life, out of yourself, whatever it is that you're looking for. And yeah, it's really, I had one person tell me that it gave her chills when she listened to it. So it's really that starting point. So you brought up, what can they do to get started? What can they do to get unstuck? They could start with the inner wisdom breakthrough. And, kind of really connect with themselves again.
Yeah.
It's amazing. If I can add one more thing, what happens when you actually kind of like get back in touch with yourself? And someday I hope to do some workshops on this, but there's an exercise that you can do too, which basically takes you back through all your dreams. And I'll do this with people. You write down all your little dreams, and then you go back through your life and you fit what has actually happened in your life to your dreams. And one of the perfect examples that I have, excuse me, is when I was little, I wanted to be a Mouseketeer. And we had this house and it had these great stones wall around it. And I just knew that you could press on this stone and it would open up this magical door. And you'd walk in and there would be all the Mouseketeers and Net and Karen and Cubby and all of them right there. And I could walk in and put my ears on. I mean, that was like, I was like 5 or something, 4 or 5. And so did I ever really become an official one? No, but my parents took me to Disneyland and I got my set of ears. So I became a Mouseketeer, And so I went through this exercise and I realized that every dream I've ever had, I've actually gotten, just maybe not fully in the way that I had originally dreamed it would happen.
So powerful. So powerful. You have so many great things to say. I could just sit here forever and listen and write them down. So thank you so much for joining us. As we wrap up then, can you maybe just share a little bit? Make sure I'll put the links in the blog post, but share where people can find you on social media, how they can learn more about you and everything.
Right. So my website is just lindamclay.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a Facebook business page. It's Linda M. Clay Biz, because the Linda M. Clay wasn't available. I have, of course, my group, Capture Your Passion, where I'm mostly at. I'm also on Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, Google Plus, all under Linda M. Clay. So
Everywhere.
I'm
Linda's everywhere.
Yep.
But
Pretty
she
much.
is mainly in her group, so definitely
Yes.
check that out. So thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having me.
Of course, I know so many women are going to be blessed by you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to check out the corresponding blog post that will have all the links for everything we talked about, as well as a good freebie for you that I'm offering around catalyzing your purpose. All right. Thanks, everyone.